Hey gamers, Lord Arcane here. This one's going to be kind of the beginning of a lengthy series, at least I'm hoping several episodes in the series, talking about culture and gaming. Now, this comes around from long history. I've been gaming forever, and I've been studying anthropology for almost as long. Actually, in the case of Everquest, longer. How's that for sad? But anyway, the things that jumped out at me. Okay, so I've been studying anthropology. I played Everquest. I've actually been to Egypt, although it's been 3 decades and change. So it's been a while. Kind of leaped out and you said, okay, this is really cool. My group can tell you, my group of friends can tell you that I'd sit around Shissar Temple here in the gray and just kind of walk around looking at the symbols and looking at the language and things like that. And saying how cool it was, and most of them didn't understand it. They were just trying to figure out why their enchanter was walking off. So I heard an earful at the time. But I wanted to come back and talk about the culture in gaming, and specifically starting with the Shissar of Luclin, because that's kind of where it all started clicking for me. I'm going to take a very anthropology approach to it. I'm going to talk about the different there are fields of study in anthropology, the specializations, if you will. And they have very different approaches to doing things. So we're going to cover them really briefly in every video just to make sure we're on the same page, and then look at them within the games and say, okay, this is what this is like. This is what that is like. And this is why. So it's going to be kind of interesting. We're comparing two different cultures, but one of them's completely fantasy based on the moon, on a moon at that. So there's going to be some lore in there. There's going to be some spoiler alerts, big time. We even put up our cute little spoiler alert sign. So that's going to be a thing. Be aware of it. Roll with the punches. And it's going to be based a lot from my experiences. So I'm always open to somebody want to argue something else with me. I am just ducky with it. Knock yourselves out. Anthropologists are phenomenal people because we love arguing with each other about what we've experienced. So, starting out with anthropology. Biological anthropology or genetic anthropology would be looking at two different groups and saying, well, how genetically related are they? How close is their DNA? Ironically, the changes over time in DNA are very, very slow. They're very, very predictable for the most part, no matter what X-Men wants to tell you. And you can tell them. Most of the changes that happen, and mutations do happen regularly, happen in parts of the DNA that are irrelevant. But there are occasional changes in DNA that are relevant, like lactose tolerance, being able to drink milk and softer cheeses, things like that. That was one of the bigger things we discussed my last semester. So how genetically related are these two cultures? Second would be linguistic anthropologist. How related are these languages? Okay, do they use the same roots and they're modified over time? How much of them are modified? Neither biological or linguistics are really my specializations. I have spent time a little bit with both. But you can tell languages and how they travel over time and how they change. In effect, it's very similar to DNA. You'll have where they go back to, if they have a word for copper, that's the same word or same very, very similar word for copper, then obviously that group of people were together when copper was important to them. If they happen to have the same word for airplane, they're very, very related recently. If they have the same word for rock, but not much else, and they kind of go back a ways and separate. Okay, archaeologists, rocks rolled. Archaeologists, they look at what they find in the ground. Their specialization, I always laugh and joke about it, but archaeologists basically study the losers in wars. But that's not true because everybody loses the war of time. But they'll go through and look at what artifacts were left behind. And a big part of what's left behind you're going to find are going to be their paintings or their artwork, not always paintings, artwork and architecture, because they tend to last longer. But that's not all. You'll have pottery. You'll have tools, weapons, things like that. And how similar would would two different cultures be based upon what they left behind. And then you got the cultural anthropologists, which look more at, well, how different are they now because of how different are their cultures? How similar are their religions, their belief systems? How similar are their traditions? How similar are their methods of doing things? Because these are things that are taught and passed on, and there's not usually a whole lot of books detailing how to sew, for example. But you learn that from your ancestors. And so that's where cultural anthropologists deal with living things. Technically, they don't have to still be living, but that's usually the kind of the premise between the difference between a cultural anthropologist and an archaeologist is, is it in the ground or is it standing up? All the undead jokes aside. Okay, so we're now going to look at Everquest specifically, and we're going to keep those 4 basic philosophies in mind. Okay, now shifting to the lore of the world. The Shissar, at least the Shissar on Luclin, fled Kunark during an area known as the Green Mist. It was a plague that was just slaughtering off the Shissar and nothing else. It was so devastating, it basically led to Ixar independence, and the Ixar Shadow Knights got their name from it. At least that's what it implies. But it was an airborne pathogen of some variety. So the Shissar freaked out, scared to death of it. They went to the moon. They completely eradicated the vacuum of a zone around their temple to prevent this plague from getting them. So out and about, we're in the gray, which is the area around the temple, which is where I'm standing now. And yeah, my character doesn't have a whole lot to worry about. But out and about in the gray here, you've got mostly undead, or mostly constructs, like these golems in front of me. Okay? Because there's no atmosphere. Within the temple itself, it has atmosphere. So you've got more living as well as some more undead. Okay, you can see some of the tie-ins to Ixar, because a lot of the skeletons that they use are Ixar. You don't see the text at the bottom of my screen, mostly because I wanted to fit as much of the important stuff on here as I could. Nobody cares if I get a tell from a gold spammer. All right, so let's look at what we've got here. Okay, I am looking at the front of the temple and the Shissar, which are snake people. You can see their pictures here, or their statues here along the sides. Now, going through genetic anthropology first, do I have anything on Earth that's a civilization of snakes? Okay, not so much. Congratulations, fantasy world, we can do whatever we want. Okay, so let's look at language next. We have hieroglyphs. Now you can look at these a little bit, okay, and you can see that they're pictures of some variety in writing form, which are hieroglyphs. This is not only Egyptian, they're not the only people that did it, but Egyptians are very well known for their hieroglyphics. Other cultures that would fit in that time frame would be like the Mesopotamians, but they use cuneiform rather than hieroglyphics. Okay? So this is your linguistic anthropology looking at this stuff. This is your archaeologist looking at the architecture. Okay? It's not a perfect pyramid, but it's not really a ziggurat either. So we're going to go with it's intended to be a perfect pyramid for this particular, my argument that it's Egyptian-based. Okay? We're going to go with the writing as your linguistic anthropologist and say that looks like hieroglyphics, which, again, the best known hieroglyphics are Egyptian-based. Matched with the pyramid, that's very likely Egyptian-based. Now, there's other things here you'll see too. Obelisks, very Egyptian-based. You'll notice that there's writing on the obelisks too. Again, hieroglyphics. Okay? You can see the pictures. Okay? The statues in front of the temple are very reminiscent of statues of the Egyptian pharaohs. Ramses had a ton of them, for example. Okay? Now, a lot of them were standing, a lot of them were sitting. The snakes don't quite stand and sit quite the same way, so there's that. Roll with the punches here. I'm on my fairly high-level monk, in an area that's, low 50s, give or take, and I'm going into the temple, which can go up to about 60. My monk's 97. I'm not really at any risk out here. Okay, that's why I chose this character. I'm not at any risk. Also, minor disclaimer here. A lot of the information that I've got is prior to the last several expansions that touched on Kunark. Okay, there might be more symbolism out there, but within Kunark, you don't have a whole lot of these same structures. You don't have the pyramids, the influence, etc. The only way we know that the Shissar originated in Kunark and controlled the Ixar was because of a monster mission in over there. I don't remember the name of it. It's been a few decades since I ran it. I'm getting kind of old. But so back to the anthropology part of this. So there's your statues. Again, that would be an archaeology thing. Again, very similar in shape and form to Ramses. These little daises that they're standing on are different, but that might be the equivalent of Ramses sitting on a throne, or the other Egyptian pharaohs, right? Now, I don't see anything that would be a cartouche, which is where Egyptians would write names, and they would write them in hieroglyphic form and then surround them. Oh, actually, there is one right there. Just a second. Leave me alone, little stupid rock. Okay, right up here, right up top. That's a cartouche. Okay, you can't see the writing really well within it, the pictures, but you can see the shape of the cartouche around it. Kind of a circle with a, almost, well, not really an arc, but a circle with a line underneath it would be a cartouche. That's a name right here. But you can't make out the pictures of what it says. And these symbols are not Egyptian symbols per se. A snake could be. It was a very common Egyptian symbol. Symbolism would be with partially linguistics, partially archaeology, and partially cultural. That one kind of fits everywhere. But you can see that cartouche right there. Okay, no, I really don't need any of this junk. Okay, thank you. All right, so there's a good argument for Egyptian. Cartouches were very Egyptian in theory. Now, here's an Ixar slave I mentioned briefly. If I attack it, he's going to die. So you just have to trust me that it's an Ixar because it says Ixar. Well, I know one way to get it to attack me. I'll just sit down. Something attacked me. There it is. See? Your basic Ixar and was dead and is now re-dead. Okay. So there ties into being from Kunark. Okay? Golems doesn't really tie into any of the symbolism anywhere else. So we'll call that one a miss. There are some societies that would have something like that, but not really well. This writing on this obelisk is identical to that other obelisk we were just looking at. You can see the cartouche a little bit better here. Okay? Now I'm going to walk around the temple for a second. This side, again, you got some hieroglyphics. Here's just some rings teleporting somebody. Say hello, Stargate. There's your influence. And Stargate, of course, was also very Egyptian, but I don't know of anything within Egyptian mythology that would tie into teleportation rings. This artwork right here with the two cobras, or the two Shissar, walking in that kind of formation with the Ixar bowing down is very Egyptianish. Okay. Don't see any more cartouches. Kind of an Egyptian influenced writing, but it's not the same letters. I studied Egyptian specifically for a couple semesters. When I went to Egypt, it kind of, as I say, kind of stirred the whole, I wanted to be an anthropologist thing in me. Okay, more writing, another Shissar. It looks a lot like them suffering from the green mist. Oh, behave yourselves. You can see him grabbing his throat, and you see the mist itself. I would say that's very symbolic of the green mist affecting them. All right. Let's go into the temple. I'll show you some of the inside as well real fast. Apparently I have to find my way there. All right, heading on inside. Can't walk straight. Don't get monkey here. Now you see also the writing at the top there. Well, now there's home. Okay, up above the chambers. Very hieroglyphic function and look as well. But again, not the same exact lettering, just the same style. There's hieroglyphs again on the door. Actually, let the door close for a second. And yes, I don't like really playing in first person because I like to be more aware of what's going on around me, especially without any kind of audio. I turned off the audio so that it's easier to hear me and less to hear my game. Okay, so looking at these graphics a little bit, I'm going to zoom in. No cartouches, but again, same lettering. Writing all around there, writing on the base board as well as on the walls. This is the same symbol that was outside on. That makes it look like he's eating an XR. Yeah, XR, it's the other white meat. Okay, you see more obelisks. Again, a fairly Egyptian sculpture like the Washington Monument was based on them as well. Okay, more writing on the walls. Now, these guys I'm picking on here, these headdresses that they're wearing are also very Egyptian in look. Okay, and their garb is very Egyptian. Granted, they don't have a torso part, but adapted for. Hey, lucid chart is what I needed. Adapted for a snake figure. They'd be wearing kind of the typical Egyptian, well, for lack of a better word, short skirt. Okay. Clearing a little bit of room here so that I don't have to fight too many of them here at once. Not that I'm terribly worried, as I mentioned before. Okay. So this is one of the teleport rooms. You can see the obelisks again. You can see the writing on the obelisks. Very hieroglyphic. The base of the obelisk is very hieroglyphic. My banshee's always in the way. There you see the same artwork outside that we saw outside of the Shissar, using the rings to get around. Oh. Apparently I'm approaching it from the wrong direction. There we go. Okay, now I'm like actually teleporting. I have to swim up or down to get to where I want to go. Call that a mechanic issue of Everquest. Instead, I'm going to swim up a little bit. Second floor, more Shissar. Okay, same graphics. Not really any changes there. All right. Oh, here comes more to attack me. As soon as I know these guys, I'll just head home, because you can do that. And we'll call this one a wrap. So you can see the reason I say this is Egyptian influenced for the Shissar. It's got the cuneiform, or rather not the cuneiform that you'd have in Mesopotamia, for example, but it has hieroglyphics, which are very similar in structure to Egyptian hieroglyphics, although not the same alphabet. You've got the artwork, which is very Egyptian in appearance as well. The way the figures are drawn look very Egyptian. If you've ever studied Egypt, you can see what I mean. The architecture is slightly different, but very similar to Egypt. Like the outside of the pyramid was not perfectly a pyramid, but it was very Egyptian of a pyramid structure. You got the symbolism, like on their heads, their headdresses was an Egyptian symbol. I have to remember which one. I think it was actually Hathor, which was a benign god, if I remember right. That one, don't quote me on. You got, okay, from the archaeology standpoint, we talked about the artwork, statues. We talked about the pyramid structures. We talked about the just the artwork in general. Okay. From a linguistic standpoint, we pointed out there's very similar in structure to Egyptian, although obviously a different alphabet. I'm going to call that one Egyptian, but with a fantasy alphabet because it's a fantasy game. Genetic anthropologists would have a hard time, but how do you bring up genetics when you don't have any DNA samples? And it's a fantasy game to boot. Cultural anthropologists looking at the religious symbolism. I don't know of any myths about snake gods directly in Egypt. I mean, they had gods for everything. And then you had a few that were, you had a serpent god. But I don't remember one of being poisoned by some nasty mist and having to flee to the moon. So there's a lot of dissimilarity there. But again, the symbolism is very Egyptian in philosophy. So what I'm going to do in these videos, I'm going to keep moving forward, looking at different things, either in Everquest like this one was, or just elsewhere, and showing what I could see, what I relate it to, etc. Recently, my family's been playing Lost Ark, for example, and you travel a lot, and you can see different cultural influences by different regions. There's some that are very Eastern, some that are very Western, a few that are, well, they're not even quite steampunk. They're more advanced than that, but you get the gist. So there's a lot going on in a lot of these games. Now, I have my philosophy, that part of what makes a game like Everquest, and Everquest has been around now for over 23 years, part of what makes it so tangible, so real, is that it's, even though it's made up, it's a fantasy game, it has enough reality to it to invest the players. If your game is too far out in left field, you'll have a hard time investing them in a role-playing aspect of it. If you're playing with a game that's strictly a war game or whatnot, the rules are a little bit different. You're not trying to make it real. You're just trying to make the game fair to fight. So Warhammer 40K, I'm not picking on it, but as an example, you'll find that a lot more people are drawn to the combat of the mass armies for the rules' sake, and they all have their different preferences because Games Workshop puts a lot of time into balancing the armies, points-wise and things like that. That's their big focus. But in a role-playing game like Everquest, you have to have it tangible. You have to have it believable. You have to have it real, even though it's a fantasy game. My philosophy again. But we can talk about all sorts of different games and different cultures. And I probably will, in this particular series, talk not just computer games, but I might even talk about parts of other games that stand out as far as real for me and what culture they're related to. Rift has several different areas. For example, the not the tabletop RPG, but the MMO. And I've played a lot of these games over the years, so they just kind of stand out. I just have to go back and remember them a little bit and do some exploration and analysis. But that wraps up this video. So I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found it interesting. And if you want to leave me comments, argue with me, I'm good with it. Point out what you think I got wrong. I'm great with it, and I'd love to discuss it with you. My focus, if you hadn't put two and two together quite on it, I'm an anthropologist in a cultural sense, but I do have some exposure to linguistics. I do have a lot more exposure to biology than linguistics, even though I've only had a couple classes for biology and biological anthropology. And then archaeology, I've had a few classes as well, specifically on ancient Egypt and to a point Mesopotamia. Okay, but I'm talking, I consider them ancient history because we're talking 4,000 or 7,000 years ago, a little bit more than last week. So cultural anthropology, my spread, it kind of covers North American native cultures, some areas of South America, both contemporary and native, a little bit of Mediterranean contemporary, ancient Egyptian, ancient Mesopotamian, and as part of making the cultures real, you got to travel them. So I've actually been on 4 continents as well. So I'll be looking at these with my lens and things that stand out. I'll share with you. And as I said, love to argue with you if anybody's got a different point of view. Aside from that, guys, you guys have a great week. And tomorrow we'll be talking about, if I get my book today, we'll be talking about G.I. Joe. Because there's actually some fun things going on in the world of G.I. Joe that are modern. So we'll talk to you later. Bye.